Hey, Robert.
You're on.
So artificial intelligence has been in the news again, not necessarily for the positive, right kind of reason. And that's this whole story with OpenAI firing their CEO and founder and hiring somebody to replace him and then bringing him back and firing the board, replacing the board. And a lot of talk about why that happened, a lot of fear. And it's interesting, a lot of it seems to be driven by different groups in Silicon Valley having a different perspective on artificial intelligence. Generally, those who want to move forward and be aggressive and see where this takes us and how it can contribute to human life. And those who are very worried and would like to kind of apply the precautionary principle, or at least partially apply it and step on the brake to slow down the development of AI. At least that's what it appears was behind the whole OpenAI fiasco. So how should we think from an ingenuous perspective? I mean, we're all for taking risks and for failure, but how should we think about it in the context of artificial intelligence?
I think that one thing that the OpenAI saga has shown a light on is that, even though here at Ingenuism, we don't spend a lot of time focused on incentives, that incentives do matter. And it's embedded in having a supportive environment for exploration and discovery, which means, providing the resources are available and the incentives are available for people to do that. But it's not really the main focus. And here you can see how the wrong incentives can completely derail the exploration discovery process. And when I say the wrong incentives, I don't mean that in a judgmental, absolute sense. I mean that different incentives have you decide to slam on the brakes of something that's seems to be moving very quickly and has a lot of upside potential because of a perceived downside risk versus that's the board at OpenAI, and then the employees have completely different incentives. They're the ones who are actually doing the work, who are applying their ingenuity, who are doing the learning, and of course have a financial upside that was very clear since the company was in the midst of working on a tender offer that would allow employees to cash out on some of their work. So it's very different incentives produce very different attitudes towards risk. And when you start trying to tinker with that or to calibrate it, and you're imagining you can do it correctly, I think you end up with these widely disparate outcomes. And we've talked about this in other areas, like in crypto, how Bitcoin can be at 60,000 and at 10,000 the next day, virtually. And here we're going to close down the effort. Shutting down the company it's tragic, but it's also the best thing for humanity oh no, we're actually doing things the same way that we were when, it was going to end the world last week. Now we're going to go ahead with that. So
Yeah, I
swinging
mean,
back and forth between the extremes.
yeah, I mean, OpenAI is this unique situation where they have very kind of a hybrid governance structure, which is very unusual. I don't know that any other example of it in technology, at least. And that is that the original OpenAI was founded as a non-for-profit, and the board of it is a non-for-profit board. It owns no economic stake in the company, and it has an explicit mandate to make sure that AI is good for humanity in some broad sense, that everybody benefits from it. Literally, that's in the charter and in the mission statement, and it's very broad. And of course, there are no financial goals. There's no technology goals. It's just these very broad statements about not harming humanity and making sure that the benefits are distributed across all of humanity. But they could only go so far technology-wise with that model. They couldn't raise money, not enough money to do what they wanted to do. So they had to create a for-profit subsidiary where that for-profit subsidiary raised the billions of dollars necessary from venture capitalists or Microsoft in order to do the work. But the for-profit subsidiary is owned or not owned so much as controlled by the nonprofit board. So even though investors gave them a lot of money, those investors gained no control, no access to the guidance and the direction of the company. This non-for-profit board, in which there was some Silicon Valley CEOs, but also some academics, again, guided by these very broad, ambiguous criteria, determined things. And it looks like they developed a conflict between, and Sam Altman, who founded it and was the CEO, had no economic stake, surprisingly, but loves this and is obviously motivated to do it. And as you said, they were going to give employees an economic stake through a tender offer, or allow them to exit through a tender offer. But the board is above that and has no economics and can control everything, or thinks it can control everything. It turned out it can't, right? It turned out that when it fired the CEO, there was a rebellion, and it turned out it had a lot less power than it thought it did.
Well, yeah, it depends on what you mean by control. So, this is it is a very academic approach, right? You say, well, hypothetically, we want some group that doesn't have a huge economic interest to have a kill switch. So if we suddenly realize that we're creating Skynet and it's going to destroy humanity, there's someone who can pull the plug. Yep. Because if there's people who have billions of dollars at stake, then you get all sorts of biases that get introduced. So we'll have this unbiased, clear thinking, fully informed board that will have their finger on the kill switch. And if inside of AI or nuclear power or weapons of mass destruction or sophisticated biotechnology, if there's a real threat to humanity, if there are large catastrophic dangers, not small dangers that you have to just allow for when you're going to go through the iterative process of experimenting and learning and making progress, but something that's catastrophic could, let's say, wipe out mankind. You want to take that into consideration. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the board isn't informed because nobody is. It's not a knock on the board, but nobody knows whether the current language models are anywhere near being a threat to humanity. We've talked about the difference between submarines and whales, and if you think that they're building a whale and it's going to go off and start doing what it wants, then I could see wanting to kill the effort. But if they're building a submarine and it's just a completely different animal, in quotes, but that serves a very specific purpose and is in a lot of ways much better, then you don't want to give someone the right to shut down the effort. And the control to kill OpenAI, that was clearly there, because there was a hot second where we thought OpenAI might just disappear. Altman was leaving, all the employees were going to leave. What did they have? They had some IP, but in a fast-moving environment like this, what you have today is cutting edge, but what it looks like next year is obsolete, and in 2 years, everyone's forgotten about it. So they couldn't kill the effort because it was just going to go to Microsoft. And then, if you're at OpenAI and you're concerned about the threat to humanity, and the alternative is, well, we give the people at OpenAI what they want, or we let them all go to Microsoft and work for Microsoft. I think it's a pretty clear choice. So you had control, but not of what you wanted to have control over. Yep. You had control over what was going to happen at OpenAI, not whether it was going to happen at all. And I think that's always been the case. And to pretend otherwise is silly unless you're willing to go the extreme of saying, look, I know what the future brings, and we're going to use nuclear weapons against data centers if we have to, because it's such a strong threat. that's untenable for me. You can't give someone that kind of power, because A, they don't know what the future is going to bring. None of us do. And B, even if they do know this time, giving them that kind of power has so much downside that I'd rather risk the AI than even a benevolent, person being in charge of things.
Yeah, and the reality is that even if they could somehow shut down OpenAI, today the 3-4 competitors, at least on a global scale, there are probably many more than that. And in terms of applications, there are many, many more. So, I mean, there are a lot of people working on these issues. There's a lot of companies competing for this. The only way to shut it down is for the government to shut it down. And then it'll be developed somewhere else. That is, even then, you're not literally shutting it down. You're just shutting down particular efforts. So no, this is
a massive global police state.
Yep.
In order for that, the way technology, given Moore's law, the way technology progresses, what is only possible with billions of dollars at OpenAI right now is going to be possible on your phone in 25 years.
Yep. So AI is going to continue. AI is not going away anytime soon. And, there's a lot of exciting prospects for what we could be using AI for. I mean, we've talked in the past about having this personal digital assistant that all you do is say, I want X, and the personal assistant not only gets you, it figures out how to get X, knows what it means, and provides you with alternatives and makes choices for you and books you the flights, the hotels, the cars, and the restaurants and everything else that you need. And it knows your taste. It knows what to do. It doesn't need constant input from you. That's the kind of world that this all is probably going to make possible.
Yeah, we've been excited about this for 25 years, and we've been waiting for 25. It reminds me of solar power, where it was always going to happen, but it never happened, and then all of a sudden it happened. And it does seem to be happening, because while you have basically two real areas where we've made a lot of progress in artificial intelligence. One is the generative AI, which takes the universe of content, whether it's pictures or text, and then is able to distill out kind of, well, what would a human being respond to given this prompt? Mm-hmm. And given the massive amount of data, it turns out that the AIs are able to learn very generally how to do this. Now, the chat bots are both amazing and ridiculous in terms of what kind of outcomes they produce. There's a lot of excitement about the possible ability of AI to start solving math problems. That isn't just having the answers to all math problems in a database somewhere, but actually able to solve new math problems by looking at, well, what are the approaches that in the past have produced correct answers. That will be cool, and I'm sure for a lot of levels of math it will happen. And that is not something that has happened yet.
Yep.
But in much narrower, well-defined areas like playing chess or playing Go, or identifying tumors on a X-ray or some other kind of scan, or facial recognition, or things that are very specific, but you can give the training is very effective. That has happened, and we made just absolutely incredible progress. And I don't see any reason why that won't happen for agents. And maybe the travel agent is one of the first, because there's a handful of things that you have to get right. So how do you figure out how to have the agent get the right flights, the right cars, the right layovers, the right hotels, and you can imagine it not taking it that long. I mean, we all learn to do this ourselves. Like, how do you plan a trip? And we've all screwed up and learned from that.
Well, we also have taught our assistants to do it for us. So, our human assistants. So it's a learnable skill that you can iterate to see. You can look at the past and see, okay, what airlines does he like to fly on? What times of day does he like to fly on? And things like that is all something that's learnable fairly easily.
And there might be some screw ups, but that's how you really learn. And they're usually fixable. It's not that you're going to be able to necessarily at the beginning pay no attention to the plans and just go where you're told to. But eventually that's kind of how it'll be.
Yep.
But there's behind that, there's a really interesting question of, okay, what is the agent actually doing? Is it going to and querying all of the airlines? Well, there's only probably 3 or 4 airlines for any given trip that you would want to query. Maybe you have your one you have status on, and then there are others that have nonstop direct flights. Number of hotels in a particular geography, that's a pretty manageable group. Number of car rental options. But when you start to get into much more interesting questions, like, okay, well, let's not make it a hotel. Let's make it a hotel or an Airbnb or a VRBO, or fill in the blank, whatever else that you might have. Is it querying all of these platforms? But what is the use of a platform if you have a house in Puerto Rico and I'm looking to rent it for a month while you're off somewhere else? What do we need the platform for? If your AI and my AI can communicate directly, and there are ways to flag, what is available, so it's not my AI has to query 8 billion other AIs around the world, but I can very quickly refine down to who are people in Puerto Rico that have houses they rent out, that have a 4.5 star rating or better. It would happen very quickly. And that to me is much more interesting, because that's what really has an economic impact. I mean, it's not that Airbnb charges an enormous amount, but it does charge a significant amount. And if you could streamline, and that's for the friction, it's for the ability to find, and then the ability to book, and then the ability to safely transact, so to manage the payments.
So the question is going to be, how does my AI let your AI know that my apartment is available? Where are the ratings housed? Right now, we know the ratings are housed on the Airbnb website. So where is this rating, and how do we? I mean, one of the things that the platforms give is a third-party objective, like I'm not rigging the ratings, right? But if it's my agent saying, hey, I'm a 5-star agent, I'm a 5-star property, how does your agent know that he's not lying? I mean, there's a lot of these kind of issues to be solved. And then the question is, maybe the platforms still exist, but they serve a different function. Maybe they still exist, but they charge a lot less money. But that whole thing needs to really evolve, and it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves and to what it evolves.
Yeah, exactly. Because you could imagine it ends up being that Airbnb can only take 4% of transactions instead of 15% of transactions. But it could evolve in a lot of other ways as well. This is where the use case for cryptocurrency becomes interesting, because one of the important but sort of in the background ways that the platforms serve a very important purpose is to secure the transaction. Mm-hmm. So how do I know you actually have a rental property? How do you know that I'm actually going to pay you? Well, if I pay you in advance, then I'm at risk. If I pay you afterwards, then you're at risk, because I've already stayed and I might just say, forget it. And so all of those have to be solved. And of course, you can solve them using the existing payment structure. I mean, you could just farm that out to Visa and MasterCard to manage that. But you could also solve it through a more, again, Visa and MasterCard don't charge that much, but a couple, 3% on trillions of dollars of transactions ends up adding up to a lot of friction, not as a percentage, but as in an aggregate dollar amounts. And so having AIs managing this, but managing it outside of the existing platforms, the payment platforms, the matching platforms, all of that, is where you could get big dollar improvements in terms of how effective, how efficient the world runs.
Yeah, and crypto would, through smart contracts, would basically take care of a lot of the maybe the rating, maybe the confidence in payments, all of that could maybe be done through some kind of smart contract mechanism through crypto.
And that is the beauty of the way crypto has evolved, which is to have it be more transparent and with the history available without it being centralized, because it's in the centralized part that you start to question whether things are real, because then you start to notice that all of the ratings are 4.5 or higher on a 5-point scale. And why is that? Well, all of the guests have an incentive to try and get good ratings, and all the hosts have incentive to try and get good ratings. And so we just cut a deal. We'll both give ourselves 5 stars. And in one instance, that doesn't affect the veracity of the ratings, but over time, they become less and less useful. So I think that we may easily end up with just the existing platforms in conjunction with the AI assistant, but that the long-term solution is unlikely to be that, because as you get more powerful assistants, they're going to be able to do more and more off platform, which means either the platform margins get compressed a lot, or you get something completely new, and the completely new piece is the one that's more exciting.
All right, the combination of AI and crypto, 2 areas that are kind of at the cutting edge right now, where there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of question marks, but super exciting about the future.
A lot of potential. And this gets back to the same question with with AI. I think there's no way to know what the probability of catastrophic risk is, but you can imagine a scenario where there's catastrophic risk, and many people have. With crypto, we seem to be going down the same rabbit hole, though, without there being catastrophic risk. That that we're slowly layering on the same regulations that have made most existing financial institutions far less innovative than they otherwise could be, in order to stop money from going to terrorists and to reduce money laundering. But it is exactly the same question. It's how much are you going to give up of the upside of a new technology in order to protect against known risks. It's with known risks, unless they're catastrophic, from an ingenuism perspective, the answer is we're not going to stop and give up the upside. We're going to just manage the known risks. With unknown risks like AI, then we're more sympathetic to the idea of, okay, well, let's not destroy the world. But when you look at the fact that the same kind of arguments, we can't afford not to slow these things down because of these risks, are used where they're clearly inappropriate from an ingenuism perspective, it makes us less sympathetic to and a lot more skeptical of those same arguments being used in an area where the risks are unknown.
So like in many parts of our lives, there's this battle between kind of those who want to move forward and enhance human well-being, and those who want to slow it down and shut down our freedoms. But the innovators seem to win out in the end, even if it's a little slower than we would like it. But let's hope they win out on this one. I'm kind of excited for the next 20 years to see where all this, what all this brings us. All right, Robert, thank you. We'll see you next week.
Great to talk, Yaron. Take care.